I've just come back from a 10-day motorcycle camping trip when I camped 8 nights. Some of these campsites were great for me and some were not. I'm going to share with you 7 ways I used to find a camping spot and let you know their strengths and weaknesses. Stick around to the end and I'll suggest a few additional resources for finding a great camping spot. Each one of these apps has its strength and there is no best app. There are 2 times when you're looking for a place to camp, while you are planning your trip and when you are on the road looking for a place for the night. I know lots of riders tell me they just start looking for a spot when they get tired or whenever they're at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And that's fine, especially if you're already in a national forest or riding a BDR. But campgrounds are not evenly distributed, so if you're riding distance on a highway, it's prudent to think about how far you might want to travel in a day and have some sites in mind before you even start out. Another thing is that we don't all want the same thing in a campsite.
See, there's a KOA campground, which, like, that's cheek by jowl. I just don't know about sticking my tent in between a couple of big things like that. Holy cow.
For me, a picnic table and a vault toilet are all the amenities I expect at a campground. Drinkable water is a bonus.
Oh, there's an outhouse, picnic tables, fire pit. That's pretty much the minimum.
That's why I like Forest Service sites the best. I'm close to nature and away from the crowds. But if your priority is a flush toilet and a shower, then you probably want to go for a private campground. I'm going to show you which methods work best to find the right type of campsite. I like to make a general plan for my trips during the winter when I'm doing less riding and even less camping. So when the weather is not amenable to riding, I'm thinking about my next trips. Let's just get this out of the way. Google Maps is not the best way to find a campsite.
Google Maps does not differentiate between this. It doesn't even show a lot of the good forestry campsites, but it doesn't tell you anything about campsites. I mean, really, it's a commercial product.
But private campgrounds are businesses, so their priority is to provide a higher level of service and charge you for it. So my first step in finding a campsite does not involve a search function or a database. I like to use Gaia GPS. Gaia GPS is a mapping app that was developed for hikers for backcountry navigation. I usually use Gaia GPS as my starting point to find a campground. It shows most of the US Forest Service sites and the Forest Service sites here in BC. But, like most digital maps, Gaia only shows things like campsites when you're sufficiently zoomed in. This means you might need to zoom in on your route and then follow it along, including some side roads into forests in order to find sites. This is easier to do on a computer than on a phone, which is why I scope out sites in advance and then save them as waypoints. I set the icon to a tent, so if I need to pull out my phone on the road, I can easily find the sites I had previously identified. This method has worked well for me on numerous trips. If Gaia shows me a campground with a name, I can look it up on the forestry website to get details. I'd like to know if there's water available, if there's a cost, and other details. The Forestry Department website also lets you know if use is heavy or light, and the open dates. You can do all this on the free version of Gaia. The paid version provides functions such as route planning, which are not the focus of this video. I've been working on another video on off-road route planning, so you might consider subscribing if you want to see that. But the information on Gaia is not perfect. In addition to actual campgrounds, Gaia shows a tent icon in places that are not designated campgrounds. In my experience, these icons mean someone has camped there and there may be a fire ring, but nothing else. I've been disappointed in a couple of these sites. Plus, Gaia is oriented toward hiking use, so Gaia can show you routes that are not easily passable by a motorcycle. Be cautious about going too far off the main road on a route provided by Gaia.
Okay, I looked up a campsite on Gaia. I'm being guided by Gaia right now. And I don't know what the road's going to be like. It looks like it's a named road, county road something. Turn right? Turn right? No, there's never going to turn right. Turn right there? I'm not turning right there.
You can find many forestry sites on Recreation.gov, which is available as an app as well as a website. Because Recreation.gov is the method used to reserve campsites, you should know that this only lists reservable campsites, which means they are the more developed sites, and they're not free. In British Columbia, there's also a web-based list of recreation sites that can be found at sitesandtrails.bc.ca. This site is maintained by the provincial government, so it's usually up to date, including closures and other information about specific sites. I'll put these links in the description below. I also use OnX Offroad to locate campsites. OnX's focus is identifying off-road motoring routes for motorized vehicles. OnX does not show as many campsites as Gaia. Outside Bryce Canyon, Gaia showed me a dispersed campsite that OnX didn't. And on another day, OnX showed me a campsite that just didn't exist. I'll also talk more about OnX in my upcoming off-road video, but you should know that just to see maps in Canada, you need the most expensive paid version. I think you can see campsites on the free version in the US. But one of the great advantages of the premium version is that it shows land ownership, which is really useful.
Okay, no trespassing there.
In Canada, we also have an app called Backroad Mapbooks, or BRMB. I found that this app has a steep learning curve for route planning and navigation, but one of its strengths is that it has a built-in database of campsites, including all the forestry recreation sites. All you have to do is set the filter to show the campgrounds and recreation sites, and you can see them from any zoom level. That alone is worth the price of the app to me. However, as I found when I was up in the Chilcotin Plateau last summer, the roads to some remote sites might be a problem. But then again, navigation is not what I'm talking about here.
Oh, look at this. This is interesting. Okay.
My focus is on motorcycle camping, so I always need a place to put a tent. But if you're sleeping in a van or a vehicle, all you need is a place to park. An app called iOverlander caters to people who are doing the van life.
Well, it's morning here in Utah. This was a pretty good place to camp. When I was looking at my phone last night, I looked at iOverlander and I saw that quite a few people had recommended this site. I have to say that iOverlander is a good resource. They don't always recommend sites that are good for motorcycles. Here's my campsite. It's just nothing. I tried to put it right behind this. Look, here's the sun coming up.
I don't recommend iOverlander for motorcycle camping, but I keep it on my phone because it's a good resource when you're really running out of options. But what do you do when you're outside of cell phone range? Both OnX and Gaia allowed you to download maps in advance, but for a big road trip, you'd have to download a lot of maps to be prepared for all possibilities. It's hard to be sure where you might be when you're looking for a place for the night, and downloaded maps take up memory on your device. Last summer, traveling through Nevada, I found myself growing tired when I was still short of the place that I had planned to cap. Having a dedicated Garmin navigation device on my motorcycle saved me by showing me that a BLM site was not very far away. Garmin uses a built-in database, so you don't need a cell signal. On the Garmin Zumo XT, you can simply search for accommodation and select campgrounds to see a list sorted by distance and direction. Since the Garmin device told me the campground was BLM, I knew it would be fairly basic and inexpensive, if not free, which it turned out to be. This is not a video about whether or not you need a satellite navigation device. All I'm saying is that several times during my trips this summer, I was in locations without cell phone service, and my Garmin proved useful in finding routes, gas, and campsites. And these are not the only apps you can use to locate campsites. People will always be creating more. 3 other apps that I've downloaded are Hipcamp, Campendium, and Dyrt. That's D-Y-R-T. Hipcamp is almost like Airbnb for camping. It lists private, reservable locations in the mid-price range. It's not my style of camping, so I haven't used it. It also includes cabins and other types of accommodation, so if you're on a motorcycle but not tenting, it may have some locations for you so you can skip the motel. Campendium is an app with a huge database of sites. The free version shows all the sites, and the paid version also shows cell coverage for major US networks, as well as BLM, national forests, and national park boundaries. The paid version is $80 a year, so I think that's a lot of money for that extra information. Finally, the Dyrt free version will show you sites but not write-ups. It's $48 a year, but you can access everything on the web browser free. But Dyrt is also associated with the Rever navigation app. Sites listed on Rever have write-ups on Dyrt, so you can easily check out the details by jumping straight from Rever to Dyrt. And Rever has a filter that will show you all the campsites. I reviewed Rever in my video on on-road navigation apps, but this is an aspect of Rever that I didn't appreciate at the time. If you want to know about Rever, watch this video on motorcycle navigation apps for on-road navigating.